Oh, hi there. Welcome to another reading. I'm still trying to control my mouse here, which goes kind of wild at times. So you kind of use the mouse to move the field around a bit, the browser. And what does it do? It magnifies everything. So I've cut off all the stuff in settings, but it still does it. So I guess some things have a will of their own. Speaking of will, this reading is called Inwardly Guided. So welcome once more to another reading from the Science of Mind magazine daily guides, courtesy of Creative Life Spiritual Center. The first quote is from Venice Bloodworth, who did a lot of work in the Atlanta area, and she had a PhD in psychology, but she helped a lot of people. She was a friend, a counselor, a psychotherapist, and apparently she left a great legacy behind. Inwardly guided. The hardest work you have to do is to learn to depend on your inner self, because you have been taught to look always to somebody else. The hardest work you have to do is to learn to depend on your inner self, because you've been taught to look always to somebody else. More about that shortly. And my computer will behave itself. Ernest Holmes in Discover a Richer Life on pages 55 and 56. This is what Ernest Holmes had to say. There is a perfect spiritual body that is part of everyone's divine inheritance. No matter through what other avenues we may seek to meet our physical and mental needs, let us often sit. Oh no, this thing is just not working. Hang on. Oh, here we go. Let us often sit in the silence of our own soul in adoration of the inner spirit. Let us in consciousness revere the God who never did anything wrong. More often than we have ever done, let us, in our thought and feeling, say, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty within me. Unquote. Let us surrender the littleness of human conceit and pride and fear and injustice. It can be done, for there is no mediator between ourselves and the eternal reality. And that's in, as I said, Discover a Richer Life, pages 55 and 56. So here is what Rev Dr Jesse Jennings has to say on that. A prayer of communion with the infinite doesn't demand or even request results. It is instead a time of acceptance, of praise, and of thanksgiving. Yet, as the psalmist said, it restores our souls. We clear away the cobwebs of opinion and judgment, so that we might see and feel our eternal home clearly. That, quote, perfect spiritual body, unquote, which Holmes mentions, also described by the Apostle Paul as, quote, a house not made by hands, eternal in the heavens, unquote. And that's actually 2 Corinthians 5:1. And it was chapter 5, verse 1. When we have felt alienated from our source for any reason, we've sought out the biblical many inventions, meaning mechanisms to cope with our spiritual pain. One of the more prominent of these is to surround ourselves with enough psychological drama and physical clutter to remain perpetually distracted. Returning to the simplicity of the One, capitalized, we discover we've always belonged to it. Nothing essential is wrong, and a huge weight lifts off us. It can be done. There's lots of different ways of looking at this. Like a lot of things in life, there's lots of different ways of looking at things. And one way is to see the fact that at least this is what we believe, that everything emanates, comes from one source. And there's one overarching mind that is above and beyond everything, and yet it's in and through everything. And if you believe that that one infinite mind has got infinite wisdom, infinite knowledge, then the answers to everything that we seek are within that one mind. And if that one mind is in and through everything, then it's in and through us. And that's what they're both speaking about here. And if that's true, then we are directly, not just directly connected with it, we're one with it. And if that mind does contain all answers to any problem of any nature whatsoever, you know what? We're actually reading from the 23rd here. Anyway, bottom line is anything can be found out because it's in that one mind. But going back to where we were. And I apologize, you're going to get Wednesdays again. My computer is zapped. I started reading. I thought, that doesn't look familiar, but I must have been mistaken. So I was. So Venice Bloodworth said, the hardest work you have to do is to learn to depend on your inner self because you've been taught to look always to someone else. This is really Monday's reading. I blew it, but it's all right. There's always a reason for everything. And the actual explanation I was saying applies to this as well. So in actual practice, suppose you find yourself confronted by a problem you seem unable to solve. Instead of thinking about the problem, turn from it to a recognition that the life principle, the divine, has no problems. Know that the mind, capitalized within you, already understands the solution to this problem. State definitely that the mind within you knows what to do. Affirm that you're inwardly guided by the supreme intelligence of the universe. Affirm that everything you ought to know, you do know. Affirm that you are compelled to make right decisions. Know that there is something, capitalized, within you which will not permit you to make a mistake. That's Science of Mind magazine, December 1962, an article published 2 years after Renaissance passed away. This is what Reverend Jesse has to say. Is it really that simple? Well, if we consent to the premise that there's one infinite mind surrounding and indwelling our minds, the idea of being compelled to make right decisions is logically consistent, provided we become still and listen. Our being one with infinite intelligence, all the specific information we need already exists right where we are. Answers willingly present themselves for the highest good of all concerned, because when anyone thrives, the whole of life benefits in some way. Some answers are to questions we haven't formed yet. Yet a future opportunity we're growing toward is already there. It's a special kind of magic to become excuse me, suddenly interested in some topic that just jumped to mind, apparently having no bearing on anything else. Why? Because it will. This is what's meant by the expression, by right of consciousness. I'm going to read the affirmation, then I'll give you my take on this. I'm guided into right action and successful accomplishment of all my good desires. What I was saying before, when I accidentally read 2 days hence, still applies. In fact, it really applies here. It's the fact that there's nowhere where the divine mind ends and yours begins, because the divine mind is in and through and has everything. And if that's true, and it really does have all the answers, then technically you possess all the answers, but you have to be willing to put yourself in a position to receive them. For instance, if somebody calls you on the phone, you call somebody, you got a problem, like my accountant, for instance. So I call my accountant eventually calls me back, but I don't pick up the phone. And for some wild reason, it doesn't get a voicemail. I'll never know the answer because I haven't tuned in to the source that's giving me the answer. And it's the same thing here. We have to tune into that source. And how do we do it? We do it by being quiet and still most of the time. Sometimes things spontaneously come to us, and you know that. An answer to something you've been looking for, boom, it just suddenly appears. But the point that they're both making here is that when we do our spiritual work, then we avail ourselves of those answers. So we sit still and come. There's a process called visioning, which I'll explain at another time, which is actually posing a question and then listening to the divine source give us the answer. So the answers are there to everything if we will but listen. If you believe the divine has got all knowledge, then there it is. If you think that's the universe that's doing that, fine, think that. As I've said many times before, I think that the divine is much bigger than the universe. I think the universe is contained within the divine mind. So, and maybe who knows how many universes. I am guided into right action and successful accomplishment of all my good desires. And we're doing that when we will take the time to sit in the quiet, pause the question, and listen for the answer, because it will come. If we're patient enough, the answer will come. So I gotta say, Reverend Lisa will be back tomorrow morning. She's working on the latter part of the Science of Mind textbook. She's still working on it. I talked to her about it on Sunday, which was yesterday, of course. She'll be back, as I said, around about 9:30. I'll be back tomorrow evening. That's a good question. It will not be 5 o'clock because I will be in a business meeting at 5 o'clock. So it's either going to be 4 o'clock or after 7. But I will be back tomorrow with another reading. It will be one you've not heard of. Wednesday, you're going to get a repeat. And guess what? You and I must have needed that repeat for what we're going to hear again on Wednesday. But there it is. That's what I believe. So until next time, namaste.